Hey, hopefully I've got the levels okay here. I'm djmjr. I am going to be explanuating the Zlob Miniat. It's a miniature attenuator. It is 2 HP, and I have two of these. I built one and I found it to be so useful that I decided to build another one. I thought that it was a pretty easy build in my memory, so I recommended it to someone as like a first build. But then I built the second one and I was like, oh, it's not as easy as I thought. So there are a few tricky things about it. One of them is resistor standing up, which a lot of people or a lot of builds will have, but it's not like first build easy, I don't think. Another thing is you solder the IC directly to the board without a socket to make it fit in 2 HP. You also bend over the capacitors, and it has like this right angle power connector, which isn't always normal. So just some things that are a little different from standard builds. The other thing is a lot of Zlob narrow things do this. Actually, a lot of the modules do this, and they have this motherboard that you solder in parallel to the control board. I'm sorry, perpendicular to the control board. So that can be a little finicky. I use non-leaded solder, so maybe that's part of it too. But like getting these little pins soldered on the right angle connectors can sometimes be a little difficult. So anyway, not a terrible build though. Probably takes about an hour to put together. It's mostly jacks and pots and switches, and then these few control things. So one of the cool things about this module is that you can use it in passive mode or in active mode. It has, so originally this was just a passive attenuator, some mixer mute. But then Zlob decided to add this motherboard to it, which it allows it to do some active things when you power it. So you can still use it in passive mode, and that's actually what I've set this one up for. I never use it like this. I always power it, but I thought to demonstrate I would show that you can use it passively as well. So I'm actually learning some new things here about how to use it passively. So I'm going to put this in. I'm doing everything upside down in this box right now, so hopefully I can figure everything out. But I'm just going to screw this into this box real quick so that it doesn't move around while we're going through our demonstration. And lost my other, there it is. So, and I just have a few modules set up in this box here. This is my little fake book case. djmjr. I have a few modules set up in here just to test this out, to give you an idea of what it can do. Let me grab some cables real quick. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is just use this as like a passive mixer. So I'm gonna, let me plug in the case first. A little USB plug. There we go. That's started, and I'm gonna turn the volume up on this one. So first I'm just gonna patch. This is a Proctrum with the radio music firmware, patching that in. I'm going to patch my output, which goes to my mixer, into the sum output here. I'm just going to turn the volume down for now. And this attenuator. So I'm going to turn this up and turn down the other mix here. you can see we faded that in. It's acting just as an attenuator on the audio signal right now. Let's see if I can screw this down a little tighter so it's not bouncing around. It's still gonna bounce around. All right. Anyway, hopefully you can see that okay. My focus is a little wonky, but hopefully it comes through here. So it's just an attenuator, and then it's also a mute. So if you flip this switch, it'll mute. So you have two channels, both have an input and an output, and then a sum out. If you use the, leave this on. If you use the output, it takes it out of the sum. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug into the output, and see it took it out of the sum out there. So typically, I use this with the summing, but you can use it both ways. Obviously, if you want to use it as two attenuators, you can do that. So I have this other proc drum module. This one has the clonk firmware on it. I'm just going to plug this into the second. And I have the attenuator about half the way up, so I'm going to turn it all the way up. Bring the other one down. All right, so you can see it works. It mixes the signals together. And then if I throw something like a trigger on this one, so I don't have to keep triggering it manually. So works great as a small audio mixer with mutes. And this is again in passive mode, so we're not even powering this right now. You can also use it to attenuate CV signals. So I believe it's DC coupled, which makes it easier. So I'm going to plug my audio interface into this Bufacco A times B plus C, and a little louder. All right, so we're plugging the outputs into there now. And actually, I'm going to run this whole thing through the filter, the SVF filter. So I'm putting the output from the mixer into the filter. Turn the resonance down for now. And we're using the low pass filter on the SVF. So I'm just going to use some modulation from the Zlob diode chaos here and modulate the filter. So this filter has an attenuator on it. So we can use that to modify this. But what if you have something that doesn't have an attenuator on it, like say these proc drums? So I can plug right into it, but I don't want this full range of what the diode chaos is doing. So I'm going to attenuate the signal by plugging it into the attenuator and then out into what I want to attenuate. That way I can just pick a little bit and increase that if I want, decrease. You know what attenuators do. All right, I'm going to do the same thing over here with the Y input or the Y output from the diode chaos. And go out into the X input of that one's actually off right now. So I can dial in a narrow range. chord to here. This is going to have some more effect. The Y of the proc drum, which is decay right now. And then you can use the mutes to turn on and off that that modulation whenever you want. So kind of neat, useful little 2 HP module, but it gets even cooler when you power it. So I'm going to move over to my slightly bigger case, my built into an ice skate case, and we're going to check out what you can do over there when you power it. So in addition to, let me switch over to that camera. So I'm working in a tight space here. And there we go. And I got to move my mic too, so sorry if this is a little... I'm going to turn it down while I move it. All right, hello. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So over here, I have my other mini app. And this one is in a place where I use it a lot, which is right next to my Rando Cordo. So this is the Barton Musical Circuit's Rando Cordo. I forget the number of it. They all have numbers. Maybe 17? No, 17 is the dual sample and hold LFO. Anyway, Rando Cordo. So what this does is it's a quantizer. It takes an input, CV in, it quantizes that according to a scale that you set, and then you can also set a range that you want it to return, and you can bump up the input signal by a certain amount using this this knob down here, and then it outputs the main quantized signal along with 3 other chord versions of that signal. So it's kind of cool. I use it a lot in a lot of my patches, so that I can have some things that are related with a chord, but only using this one module, and they're all using kind of the same input source. But a lot of times I'm using some random source. Like right now I'm using, out of the EuroPie, I have the consequencer script running, which is a drum sequencer. So my top 3 inputs are, or top 3 outputs here, are a bass drum, like a snare drum, and a hat, pretty much. I have the bass drum running into a kick-all. I have the snare drum pattern running into a clonk drum, and then I have the snare drum running into a VCA with some noise coming out of the kinks here. So it's just hitting that noise. So that's what you hear right now with those drums. And then I have a secondary signal. One of these is running into ripples, and I'm using that in self-oscillation mode to give me some voltage per octave tracked to go along with the main sound. And then that's running through warps, giving some delay to it to give it some interesting stuff. Anyway, so what I run into is if I just run straight out of the bottom 3 outputs, the bottom 3 outputs of the consequencer script are random stepped voltages. So those get output, and you can change those by pressing the left and right buttons here, which is cool when you're doing just like, just most of the time I just want to mess with the sounds and let something else take care of making it an orderly sound, making the melody. And so that's what this does. But if I just feed in the output from this into my quantizer, it's a really wide range, like a really, really wide range. So I'm going to go ahead and turn up the direct quantized. I have it running into plats, the mutable instruments plats, and it's in the fifth orange mode, which is has one of my favorite sounds on it when it's when the harmonics knob is about at 1 or 2 o'clock. but you can hear like I'm getting some like really screechy sounds, some low sounds. Hopefully you can hear it. I'll turn it up a little. So it's almost like ear piercing, like it's a little annoying, and that's because it's taking in that full range of the random stepped output. So what I really need is something to reduce that, like an attenuator. So I'm going to take that out, then my attenuator, and then I'm going to run out of the attenuator into my CVN. So, you know, now you're actually getting notes within a more defined range. And then, so the attenuator limits it from the bottom to a top amount. It kind of squeezes it. So if I want to bump that up some, I can use this knob down here. But it shifts the whole thing over, which is what I want. I want it to be in a narrow range. And then I control where it goes within that range. So another cool thing is, so this is the one in active mode. So this is plugged into my power. Has a 10 pin power connector. And so it lets you input something, but it also lets you, when it's powered, whatever doesn't have an in plugged into it turns into an offset. So it's supplying voltage. So right now, this bottom knob doesn't have anything plugged into it, so it's a voltage offset. So if I flip this switch to turn it on, you can hear everything go up. And I can switch it off. And it goes back down to the original. So I can add some variation to the music just by flipping this on and off at random times. And I can set this offset to be any value. I think it's 0 to 5 volts. So, and then you can actually, if you just want to use this as an offset or a voltage source, each one of these knobs is 5 volts, and then it sums them. The summed output in active mode is buffered. So it gets buffered through there, and I believe you can output up to 10 volts, then 0 to 10 volts with both of them unpatched. But it, so that's one thing I use it for. Another thing is I'll run two, instead of just running one of these random step voltages, I'll run two of these random step voltages from the consequencer into here. And then I can switch between them, or I can turn them both off, which just gives me a flat note. Or I can turn them both on, which is the interaction between the two. And then every time I hit this button, it switches to the next thing, the next pattern. And I can go back to the pattern before that. And again, I have those same options of switching one or two of these switches off. So anyway, that's the Jlab Miniat miniature attenuator. It's 2 HP. I didn't talk about cost. So it's $50 built, $35 for the kit, or the way I've done it is it's about $15 for the PCB and panel. And if you wait, Jlab has sales every now and then. And then it's about $7 in parts. So that's US dollars, about $22 total for the parts and panel and PCB. It's a pretty cool looking panel too. And the panel's actually reversible. So if you don't like all the designs on here, you can flip it over to what Jlab calls the soulless panel, which doesn't have any of the artwork on it. It's available at Jlab. I think SynthCube also carries these. I'm not sure who else, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed my explanation, and maybe next time you're looking for a 2 HP attenuator, there you go.